How are you, Monica? Thanks for gracing us with your presence today and taking part in this discussion.
Thanks for having me.
So share with us, so how did you begin your writing career?
Okay, I would love to say that, well, I planned my writing career right from the start, right? But the truth is actually, I think I stumbled into a writing career. What happened was I was doing my honours year in sociology at NUS, and then I was offered a scholarship by a state board, and I jumped on it because it was like, otherwise, if I graduate with a sociology degree, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not sure what kind of work, who would hire me, right? So I thought, yes, okay, so we pondered that. That's fine, I'll have a job when I graduate. So I graduated, I worked at the state board, and I think very fortuitously, they put me in the public relations department. So in public relations, we do a lot of writing as part of the work, like press releases, annual reports, and brochures, and so on. So I took to it like a fish in water because the writing just comes very naturally to me. So I think that was kind of a natural start to a writing career. So it kind of like put me on this course on
towards creative writing, content writing.
Yeah, a communications career.
Where do you find the inspiration from when you do your writing? Is it you have to see something, or is it a feeling, or how does it come to you?
Okay, inspiration for corporate writing is very different.
Very straightforward.
Yeah, it's not like you're writing a story,
yes,
right?
yes.
So it's what is it you're trying to communicate, So how can we do this very creatively? Can we use analogies maybe from some other industry to make it more fun? If we're writing for advertising, for example, how do we make it stand out? How does it catch attention? Versus an annual report, it's very different. It's a straightforward kind of reporting, but of course we have to do it very simply and not write really long sentences that put everybody to sleep, right?
Okay.
So, but basically from there, so my career in communications, that was how it started.
Okay, so that we can get to the next question, which is, so how easy was it to set up Hedgehog Communications, and what were the challenges that
no, actually this was
before?
Hedgehog, yeah. So this was when I was still employed.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did this. I from that first job, I went on to several others to head communications departments in various public and private organizations. So I've been doing this about 10 years by 2002.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so by then, well, it was getting tough because my two kids were 2 and 5, and it was getting very difficult to juggle the responsibilities at work and then try to look after them. I guess what many people don't know is that I had a very, very progressive boss this is very strange, but my last job at 202 was actually at SMU. I was heading the comms department at SMU. So it's kind of like a homecoming of sorts.
Nice.
But yeah, so my boss that time, the president of SMU, who was the first president, I think, Prof. Janice Balache. So she's a woman herself, and she's very supportive. So she actually allowed me a pseudo kind of work from home
That's
arrangement,
great.
which at that time, 202, it was practically unheard of. Nobody did that. So I could be at home some of the time and at work some of the time. But it was very, very stressful because I was heading the department. So I wasn't like just doing one annual report that I could write from home, and do that. So I had to actually oversee the department. So when I was home, I was worrying about stuff in the office, and when I was in the office, I was worrying about stuff at home, right? And then I was like, okay, this is not going to work. So I bit the bullet. I decided I was going to find a business where I could work operating from home, and naturally, writing was a very natural kind of choice because it's very low overheads. I didn't really need very much. But when I tell people this now, it makes sense. But actually, people don't realize that it was a much riskier decision back then because 2002, the economy I think was still trying to recover from the Asian financial crisis.
Yeah.
And at that time, actually, very few organizations outsourced writing. Most writing was done in-house by comms departments. That means they did their own writing. Very few people looked for writers to do this stuff. So people thought I was crazy. Like even the chairman of SMU, Mr. Ho Kwon Ping, right? Because we used to work very closely on comms stuff. He wrote me an email to say, "Wow, good luck on your venture. You are very brave." And actually, if you read between the lines, it actually meant you are really stupid to want to do this. Like, what are you doing? So people thought I was a bit crazy because I was giving out this fantastic career and job and salary, as head of comms at SMU, to come and start this very risky venture with 2 very young children to feed. Yeah. So
that's when the idea from Hedgehog was
so
born.
that's how Hedgehog Communications actually came
Right.
about. So it's a copywriting agency that I started with just me.
So how was it? I've got a son myself who is 2, so
Yeah.
I know how demanding they can get at that age. And how did you manage to set up a company and then get on clients while having these 2 kids at home? What were the challenges with that?
Well, okay, copywriting, well, one of the benefits of copywriting is that it's very simple. I mean, you
Yeah.
don't really need much, right? You need a computer, basically, and then that's all, you're ready to go. So I think what was harder was actually learning the trades of starting a business, you know? So when you're a one-woman show, basically you are the accountant, the manager, the business rep, and everything, and being all rolled into one, right? So you gotta learn everything, yeah. So I think when you start a business, the hardest part always is getting the business, drumming up the business.
Yes, cold calling.
Yeah.
Do you want me to write for you?
Exactly. So I knew I could write, but trying to persuade organizations to pay me to do so was a very different story, right? So, but you know, I gave it my best shot. I went out, I knocked on doors, you know, I sent out a gazillion emails, you know, I just called, basically I just hopped my CV. But I have to say that I've been very, very fortunate because I've always met people who are willing to give me a chance. So from there, I started out with a few projects, and then it kind of like word of mouth and snowballed. And also, I think a little luck always plays into it because at the time when it came out, there began a trend of outsourcing writing. So in that sense, I was actually a first mover. So by the time people started outsourcing writing, there were not a lot of players out there, you know. So I was one of those, so I could actually win quite a lot of jobs. So 5 years from there, so 2002, right? So in 2007, I found myself with so much work that I had to turn jobs down, so it got a bit crazy. So I remember the epiphany came when I was, because there was one year, 2007, I wrote 9 annual reports that year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, 5 of which was at the same time. So I was at the building of Temasek Holdings, I was going up to the office, and then I came out and thinking that I was at Singtel, because I was actually writing both there and and then when I came out of the lift lobby, I'm wondering like, where am I? And then that was when the thing struck me, like this cannot go on forever, you know, it cannot go on like this. So I decided then and there that, okay, I will expand. Yeah, and then that's when I started to look for copywriters.
How many do you have on your team right now?
Currently we have 13.
13, and you hire only female writers? Is that
not only? Yeah, not only, but yeah, so I will explain that not only, but it started out very slowly actually, because when I was first looking for copywriters, I mean that job was not really well known, you know. First of all, if you're a very established copywriter, you wouldn't want to join me because you would have heard of me, right? But at the same time, I didn't just want to take, I wanted to take people who could write with the same level of professionalism that we had kind of come to know for. So it was slow at first, but yeah, so it took a while, but eventually, I think now, so it's 16 years. So today, I think we're one of the most established copywriting agencies actually in Singapore, like you were saying earlier, especially for the public sector. So we help many organizations. Basically what we do is we help organizations communicate better through written communications, by making their communication simpler, clearer, and more creative. And it sounds very easy, you know, it sounds very straightforward, right? But actually it's really difficult because you'll find that so many organizations are so bogged down. There's so much information overload that they can't see beyond the fog, you know? And everything is important, right? They want to keep everything is important. So we got to go in and help them distill their messages. What is it that you're actually trying to say? You know, so and how do we best say this? So I mean, I'm very happy to say that we've helped so many national level organizations, you know, do their communications. So for example, the MOM website that was written by us, the new revamped one. So it's very simple. You go in, you know where to go for whatever task that you need to do. We wrote the very first Visit Singapore.com, but by STB, and even business.gov.sg. So many. So currently we're writing for Marina Bay Sands and MAS.
That's fantastic. You've got this great portfolio going for yourself.
Yeah.
Back in those days, was copywriting a male-dominated career, or was it a balance of both?
Not really. I mean, copyright. I think there are actually more female copywriters than male writers. So
do you think female copywriters offer a certain more flair or finesse more so than male copywriters, or is there a difference in that?
I don't think so. I don't think it's naturally like women have a better flair. I think just some people have a greater affinity with words than others,
That's
regardless of gender. But among the people that I've seen, I've come across actually more female copywriters than male ones. Yeah.
And so you did copywriting, and then you ventured into books eventually. So tell us, how did you venture into that, and how did it happen? What was the epiphany that made you decide, I want to write a book?
Books. Okay, so how that happened was in 2008, I decided to start a blog because my kids were in primary school then, and I thought, it's a great time to be able to capture the memories, all the fun things that they did, the silly things that they did, photos and everything. I mean, because you've got to look back 10 years from now and you wouldn't remember anything. So I actually started that with a very simple idea to just capture memories. But then the blog kind of grew, and me being very opinionated, when they were going to school, I found that I had a lot of issues with the education system. So, and then I would post stuff like, as a parent, so I experienced this, why does it have to be this way? Why, and I question certain things and so on. And then that whole kiasuism thing, like, why do parents react this way, like, so the blog started attracting a lot of like-minded parents, some who came in and said, yeah, I share your view, so that was very nice, until then somehow the media kind of got wind of it, and they started calling me when they had views on education. So that was still okay until I think 2011. I wrote an open letter to the then newly appointed Minister for Education, Mr. Heng Swee Keat. And then that one kind of went viral. And then so everybody was sharing it, and people were spamming his Facebook and mailbox with the letter. So because of that, I came up on MOE's radar. And then so I started being invited to a lot of like national conversations about education and so on. So what happened was, because of this, and I ended up speaking to educators, the government and parents and so on, and I found that I had this repository of views from very different perspectives, and they were very interesting. I mean, they gave me a whole overview of, okay, so this is the whole ecosystem, and why certain things might work, why certain things might not work, because you cannot actually change one section without thinking about the other parts of the ecosystem. Actually, everything works together, so I thought that was interesting. Plus, on my blog, I used to share like snippets of really silly things that my son used to do. So I'm not going to point him out. And the funny thing
I see someone smiling over there, so I'm really suspecting.
And the funny thing was, these stories actually garnered the most response from parents. So it seemed like people really liked that, and they found it really fun to read and so on. So one day I just thought, like, maybe all of this could go into a book, why not? So I just cobbled some pieces together, and I sent it into Epigram, the boss of Epigram, Edmund, and I said, do you think, this might work in a book? And then he just emailed me back and said, yes, let's talk, I like this. So that was very quick and like very easy. So yeah, so that's how the good, the bad, and the PSLE actually came about. Not sure. Yeah, that is on the screen. So this was in 2013. So this book basically is about a semi-fictional account of this mother with two children. And then she swings from like a pendulum, from one to the other, being very kanjong and yet trying to, let them have a childhood. So her older daughter, April, has all the makings of an A-star student, right? She's driven, she does her homework, she goes for tuition and all of that. And then her younger son, his two favorite subjects are PE and recess. So, so she's trying to like grab him and get him to cooperate, and that. So the book just goes around that. So the adventures of this mother and the two children, and it fittingly ends with the race towards the elder daughter's PSLE, taking the PSLE exam. So, well, I kind of wrote it as a mocking the Asian, stereotypical Asian parent, because I think that amidst all these kind of stresses that we kind of heap on ourselves, right, we should be able to laugh at ourselves a little. Sometimes it goes a bit overboard. So yeah, so I wrote it as a very light-hearted read and nothing too serious.
And then from then onwards, you also started authoring Danger Dan, Gadget Girl series with your daughter, Leslie Ann, which is so great. It's very rare. Oh, hi. I mean, it's so rare to come across a mother-daughter collaboration. So tell us, how did that come about, and how did you get her input and your inputs, and then make this holistic, book happen together as a mother-daughter collaboration? Share with us about that.
Okay, so in 2013, that was the same year that this book came out, Epigram told me they were putting out an open call for a new children's book series about a boy who time travels back into Singapore's past. So it's a venture to try and also interest kids in local history. So it's an open call, meaning that other authors who were interested might also try out for it. So they asked me whether I was interested. So at that time, Leslie Ann was 16. She was in Sec 4. And she loves words. I mean, she's an avid reader. She topped her level in Sec 4 in literature and so on. And she thought, hey, it'd be really nice to try out for this. So I mooted the idea with Epigram, but they were a bit concerned, not so much about her ability, but because she was in school. I mean, how was she going to cope with this writing thing and being in school full time? So we talked about it and we said, okay, why don't we try? I mean, it's been unusual, but let's try it as a mother-daughter team. So I mean, we can support each other. So we brainstormed ideas, what the whole series would be like, what the characters would be like, the whole character universe. We plotted out some chapters. We sent in a sample chapter, and I think they must have liked our ideas because that's how they awarded us the contract, and that's actually how Danger Dan was born.
That's great. Yeah. And does Leslie Ann want to be a writer herself? Do you have any advice? Have you given her any advice based on your writing background?
Well, she's going to turn 21, in a couple of weeks, so she can decide for herself. But I think at this age, I totally believe that you should just go out and try as many things as you want. I mean, you don't really have to decide at 21 what you want to do for the rest of your life because there's so much that you haven't yet experienced.
Yes.
So you should go out and try stuff and find out what you like, what you don't like, and then later you decide what you want to do. So.
And what sort of advice do you have for aspiring writers? Are there any sort of ethos or values they should adhere to become a successful writer or?
Okay, well, there are two types, right? We're talking about, one is you're talking about book writer, and the other is you're talking about corporate writer, which is
so what's your advice for sort of both sectors?
Yeah. Okay, so for book writing, I think many people dream of being an author. I mean, I talk to people and that's what they tell me. But I always have the feeling that if this dream is fueled mainly by the fact that you want to see your name in print, then I think the starting point already is a bit wrong. Because the love of writing has to come first. Because otherwise, I think people don't realize that when people pay money for your books, and then they spend the time to read your book, it's actually an investment of their time and money. So it's a privilege for the writer, not for the reader. So when you want to just put out something just for the sake of having to say that you are a published author, I think that disrespects the reader's time. So if you want to do this, always start with, you must love to write, So for me, I didn't start out as the published author. I just wrote for many years, wrote and wrote, until by the time the opportunity came about to be a published author, I found that I had honed my craft enough to know that I could put out a decent book. And I think that's the kind of advice that I would. If you want to be a writer, just write. It doesn't matter what platform, just write.
And can you also share with us what traits did you think you had from very young to persevere yourself and get you to where you are today? Was there anyone that inspired you, a role model or mentor that gave you that sort of shared these traits with you?
I think I am very, very grateful to the women who were very supportive of me in life. Okay, so I talked about Janice Balache in SMU, but actually even before that, so this is 1998, I was heading the marketing at Singapore Symphony Orchestra. So my boss was the general manager, Ms. Tisa Ng. And she, because I was pregnant with Leslie Ann, and she said, I know it's going to be tough, how are you going to juggle this? So why don't you work from home 4 days a week, you come in 1 day of the week. This was 1998. Nobody talked about flexi work or family arrangements and so on. So she was totally ahead of her time. So the office, the rest of the office kind of didn't know how to address this as well because nobody talked about this, So I think I'm very grateful to all these women who have kind of shown that kind of support. And sometimes I hear people talk about women are their worst enemies, right?
They can be, but they can be your greatest advocates as well.
Yeah, exactly. So from there, I'm always very grateful to them because they kind of set the standards of what we women can do to empower other women. And so that's what I try to do with Hedgehog. So I think earlier on you were asking about whether they were mostly women.
Yes.
Okay, so I have 13 writers. So when I was first started out looking for copywriters to join HR Communications, one of the groups that I actively sought out was actually moms like me, who might have quit their jobs for various reasons to look after their kids, but they're so capable because they have all these years of work experience behind them, but then they have to quit because of their kids, but they are also looking for something meaningful to do with their lives. And HOP was a perfect platform, the avenue to do this. So, they're capable, and then they're also terribly reliable because, and they're very efficient because, look, I want to get the job done.
Moms are great at time management,
no chilling around at the water cooler and all that stuff, right? Plus, they're really, really loyal because they're so grateful for this opportunity to be able to do meaningful work. So, in fact, actually, the two moms that I took on, the first two writers I took on in 2007, I think they're still writing for me. So most of my hedgehog writers, once they join, they never leave. so because of their experience, so what we have is, in some copywriting agencies, they might be actually fronted by very senior personalities, but the actual writing is done by very junior staff or interns and so on. But here, all our writers are experts in their own right. So we have with us a former GM of a PR agency, former head of comms at MNC, ex-managing editor, I think, of a publishing firm. I have a 20-year award-winning journalist from SPH. And they're all with me because they like this arrangement. So, and they actually do the work. So they do the actual writing, hence the quality of our work. And it's flexi work, meaning they can take on as many or as few jobs as they like or whatever their schedule will allow. And it's not just about the work. I want to stress that, because here I try to create a community where people can be happy and work with very like-minded, people. And we have such a supportive and collaborative attitude at Hedgehog. So because some of our projects are really huge, like when we do national level websites, you're talking about hundreds, sometimes 1,000 pages. You can't have one writer handling that whole project. So they work in teams, and we shuffle around different people working in different teams. And it's always been very supportive. And with moms, emergencies always crop up, right? Somebody is going to fall sick, or somebody fell and sprained his ankle. So you need to rush home. And because another writer will always be there to kind of jump in and hold the fort and make sure that everything is okay. So I think that's the mom culture right there. Well, not all of them are moms, but that's the kind of culture.
I think it's great you're giving women these kind of opportunities, because I'm a mom myself, right? And I just started working again in November, and I feel this sense of self-worth sort of coming back again. It's you're a mom, but you also still want to be yourself. You still want to be Choi, you still want to be Monica. So I think it's fantastic you've got this platform for moms to come back to and feel fulfilled in that sense in their careers again.
Well, I have to say it's not entirely altruistic. They do great work. They're a great resource. I think moms are such an untapped and underappreciated resource. They do really
we are fantastic multitaskers as well.
Exactly.
We can still manage to churn out a whole paper and then get dinner ready and get the son off to school and all that. So, we can do that.
And no time for bitching and politicking, all that. And just get the work done,
Support one another.
Exactly.
So tell us, what's the best part about being an author?
The best part about being an author, I think nothing beats having a kid come up to you with this very well-worn book of yours, and saying that he has read it many times. Nothing beats that. We once did a session at, I think, Bishan Library, and there was this mom who brought her kids all the way from Simei to Bishan Library to meet us because she said Danger Dan got her son to love reading. And I think that makes all the work worthwhile. Come on, to make a kid happy, make a kid love reading. I think that's just all the intangibles.
That's great. And do you find, are there any particular challenges now with writing these days? Now, I guess a lot of people are more online reading. Do you have to sort of maybe write to cater to an online audience or maybe a physical audience? Is there a difference in that these days? Do you find any challenges with that?
Well, I think it's always the case of when people are more well-read, so they're more exposed to stuff. So I think originality is harder and harder. And I find that in Singapore, we don't value originality enough. I mean, even for kids' books, I come across so many kids' books where it's just rehashing old formulas, old stories, stereotypical characters over and over again. Because it's easier to do that. If something sells, you just copy. We seem to always trying to copy the next big thing, right? So I totally don't believe in that. So when Leslie and I write the books, we try and make sure that we bounce off ideas, as original as possible, although it's a lot more work. So that, I think, is the hardest part, coming up with original ideas.
Okay. Do you run any sort of mentoring writing programs with your company? Because I think you and your team of women could serve as a platform of inspiration for some aspiring writers here today. Do you have anything like that in the plans, or are you doing that already? Or
we do creative writing workshops. So Leslie and I do creative writing workshops.
Okay.
But that's more for like primary school kids and so on. So I'm not great in front of an audience. So teaching is one of my least favorite activities. So I don't unless we're asked, we usually don't volunteer.
Because I think you would serve. I think it would be amazing if you could do something like that.
We mentor. The writers in our in head job. I mentor them a lot. Even though they have all this, so when they come on, we have to make sure that they understand the kind of standards that we have. So the first write-ups that they do for a client, they always have to come through me first, and then I'm very, very brutal. Why do you use this word? What does this exactly mean? Was there a simpler word, and why did you use that instead of this? Why did you talk about this here when it could have been here? All of that stuff. It's just to make them think a little deeper about how to use words. Now, it annoys me when words are thrown around very carelessly. People use it without really thinking, right? People use jargon and buzzwords.
Such as, can you share something like an example?
No, like if the shop, the exclusive discounts, exclusive to who? Okay, I get you. Yeah. Everybody gets the discount, right? So who is it exclusive to? So it's just words that are just being thrown around all the time. So I don't like that. So to me, if you want to use words and you want to communicate, your words have to be very intentional. You choose them with care. Like, why do you choose this? You have to know. There could be a reason. I may not agree with your choice, but you have to know why you used it,
right?
Or why you phrase this a certain way.
So is that one of your pet peeves with clients that you bring on sometimes? Is
with clients, they hire us, so it's okay if you don't know, but as long as we don't write for you and then you still insist on using your own jargon, that's fine. We don't expect you to know. You basically hire us to make the things better for you.
Okay. Yeah. Now you mentioned about the positivities about being an author and writer. Are there any setbacks? Any negative traits?
Negative. I think one of the hardest things
things come across
for me being a writer is actually nobody tells you that when you are a published author that you'll actually spend more time doing marketing activities than writing. And that's really, really hard for me.
Pitching to publishers as well and things like that?
Well, not really, because we don't really pitch, but it's like talks, workshops, going to events, and having to do presentations. And I think there's a reason why many writers become writers, because we like to write, we don't like to speak.
That's what Get was mentioning earlier. She goes, I hate to talk, but I love to share my story on the screen.
So you asked me to tell the story in writing. I'll do that really well, but ask me to come here and talk to you for 1 hour. That's really hard.
Would you like a mocktail then? It will relax you a little bit.
So it's the marketing activities that, the first time we did it, for Leslie, and I guess it's even worse because she was so young when she started. So at 16, we were invited to our first primary school talk. And the teacher said, okay, don't worry about it. No, it's just only about 800 students.
Worst nightmare come true.
So I don't know how we got through that, but okay, it gets easier. It gets easier. Yeah.
And can you also share maybe what are the most important traits someone should possess to be a successful writer? Besides being having a great creative flow, having a great way with words, what are some of the more key important traits you should have as writers?
I think for fiction, I think a great imagination. It's just coming up with a story. Well, I believe firmly in plot-driven stories, especially for kids, because if you don't go anywhere, basically the kids get bored, right? So having a very original plot, that takes a lot of work. How do you come up with something? So I admire people with fantastic imagination, with like film writers, and screenwriters and so on. The story is what gets me, and I think, as I was saying, because as more and more books come out, the marketplace is so flooded. And how do you get heard?
Yeah, how do you cut out all the noise?
Yeah.
And do you think there's besides in obviously upper education, do you think in schools now in Singapore they're doing a more bigger push on writing and improving writing skills? Do you see that happening?
My kids have been out of primary school for a long time, but when they were in it,
or high school,
I used to hate it. It was all that memorizing good phrases and all the composition stuff, which I thought was like, you're taking the creativity out of creative writing, which is how ironic is that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I never believed in that. That was so hard. And I just thought that schools just basically killed the writing. Every other week, they were writing about accidents. I mean, seriously.
Accidents?
Yeah, like primary
so
school
random.
competitions, right?
Really?
There's always this kid getting into some trouble, falling down, or getting hit by a car, or whatever, you know. It's the most boring thing ever.
So do you think that there should be more of a push towards creative writing in schools then to nurture a new generation of
yes, but
aspiring writers?
previously, as I was saying, the whole education thing it's a whole ecosystem. I think parents also like to blame the ministry and so on, but come on, I mean, if the parents are the ones out to game the system by saying that, okay, you go to this and you memorize this so that you can get A star, you know, so who do you blame then? I mean, everything is connected, you know.
Yeah.
And so you can't change one without changing another. It's this whole mindset, yeah. So it's very hard to, I mean, I've been there. I mean, I didn't want to follow it, but I'll tell you, it's very, very hard to be the lone voice against the tide of everything else. It's very difficult, you know.
Okay.
So you know what you believe in, and you try in your little small way to make a difference, but no, you are fighting the whole system. All the other kiasu parents who tell you you should be sending your kids for enrichment, you know, before the PSLE year, and all of that stuff. So how strong you want to be?
Yeah, I guess so. Okay, well, thank you for your amazing insight. I'd like to open questions now to the audience. Okay, I'll come over. I'll just stand around here, it's easier.
Writers are born or are they made? And
Okay, I think some people have a greater affinity with words, you know. So some people just have a flair with expression, but it never is enough. I mean, personally, I feel that I've been writing for more than 20 years. And I found that just from writing my blog, for example, my expression became a lot more sophisticated. It came a lot easier as the years went by. And it wasn't that I didn't know how to write before. I've been writing for 10 years before that. But it's just a simple fact that the more you do something, the better you get. I mean, that's just simple. So if you want to be a writer, that's why I say you just keep writing. You just get better naturally, just from the number of hours you put into it.
my next question is going to be,
Yeah.
I mean, so it's quite popular to say that you have to put in a lot of hours and so on and so forth. What's the feedback loop for creating that finesse in your writing? It's one thing to just mindlessly type out words, not of them. But how do you refine your style? How do you find your own style, for example? That itself is a very difficult process. Or what was your writing journey has been in that sense?
Okay, because my writing journey, a lot of it was corporate. So corporate, you kind of fine-tune the style when you get feedback from clients especially. You know, so after a while you find out, okay, what works, what doesn't work, what clients really like, because what tells a story better than others. So you can't refine your style. But yeah, so feedback, I mean, if you have people, friends who are happy to read your work and to tell you what they think, you know, that's always great. And preferably not friends who just want to tell you you're fantastic, you know, because they don't want to hurt your feelings, right? People who actually read and can recognize what good writing is, and they are able to tell you, okay, well, this part kind of lost me a little bit, you know, because it wasn't interesting and so yes, having feedback is really important. Yeah, besides having friends, I'm not sure how else you would do this.
Any other questions?
My question is from the point of view as a mom in business. At which point, I mean, you decided to quit your job because of your kids and do business. But at which point, when the business gets so hard, what was the decision that made you stay on to persevere until today instead of going back to full-time job? So that's the first question. My second question is, as a businesswoman in writing, right? How do you give feedback to your writers to say this doesn't work, and how can they be more receptive to your feedback?
The first one, how do I not give up? Okay, well, you like running a business, you know, there are good times, there are bad times, right? So during lull periods, you start to get a little bit worried, and especially when I already had writers, so it wasn't just me going to staff if there was no work. I mean, it was all my other writers, right? So of course you doubt, but I think because I was quite fortunate, I had many years of the business kept growing. So even when there were low periods, I would tell myself like, okay, not to worry, I think it should pick up in a while. So it's just a phase, you know. Why I didn't give up? Several reasons. One of them was when I was doing in a full-time job, I always that part of me, it just nagged me that in the prime of my life, the bulk of my waking hours belonged to somebody else. That means from 8:30 to 6, my time belonged to somebody else. So, and that time could have been better spent. I mean, I could probably do the work in half the time and then spend it with my kids, right? So it was, to me, a very inefficient use of my time. So when I run the business, I decide how to spend my time. If I can write really fast, you know, I finish my work and then the rest of the time I can do whatever I want. So that was always a motivator. So going back was never very appealing to me, you know. So if anything, the only reason to ever go back would be the stability in income. But I think because we kind of grew to a sense where I knew it was fine, it was going to be fine, and income was all right. Plus, I think the sense of purpose, like knowing that there are these women who kind of depend on Hedgehog to continue the lifestyle that they were doing, and there was so much joy, you know, in being able to be with their kids. You know, oh, yeah, I sent my kids to his badminton class today, and then he did this and that. That is so fantastic. It's something they wouldn't have been able to do if they were back at a full-time job, or if they were a stay-at-home mom and then feeling like, you know, the only role was mom, like you say, you know, that's it, your mom and nobody else, you know. So, so knowing that the Hedgehog was home to like this group of people, I mean, that definitely was a big motivator to keep going. Okay, your second question as to how do I give them feedback? Oh, because in business, I mean, even when I take them on, I am very, very direct with them. It's like, work is work, you know. If certain things are up to standard, I will tell you, and you cannot take it personally. I mean, this is nothing to do with friendship or how I treat you. Work is work. So when they first come in, they normally go through this pseudo trial period where everything goes through me first before it goes to the client. So, and then, like I was saying, you know, I would tell them if I thought certain things were not right, or come on with a catchy title, you know, it could be just this, you know, like the same thing that people have heard over and over, change it. Or don't use this sort of phrase, or your sentences are too long, it's too long-winded, you know, nobody can catch it. So all of that feedback always goes. So after a while, they kind of get what I'm going for. But of course, sometimes if we get a new client, where they might not have worked in that same kind of style before. For example, they have to work on coffee table book instead of a website that they've always been writing for. Then I might go back to say, okay, send me your first draft, I will look at it again, and just to make sure that everything is on point. But because these, as I was saying, these writers are all experts in their own right. They've got like, most of them have at least 10 years in the industry, so they catch on very quickly, and they are happy to learn. It's not like they'll be like, I think I'm wonderful and why are you correcting me? I have never encountered that, with my writers.
Question?
I just want to know, like, because a writer has different types, right? So let's say if you're very new in writing, if you want to form like one page, is it important, or you must, when you want to do a book, you have to form a few pages? Or if, let's say, this writer wants to write, but they have constraint in language, English or something, but have full of ideas, where would you advise the person to start with first? Is it through a company or something? Yeah.
So you're talking about book writing, right? Book writing, well, I mean, the good thing these days is that there's so many different platforms. I mean, there are blogs, okay, I'm not very IT savvy, but I'm sure that there are many other places where you can actually put up your work, and then people can actually come in to critique and tell you what's wrong. So it's a great learning experience there, whereas in the past, you know, you can't unless you find somebody who can read it for you. So the only thing I can say about language is, you know, if you put down all your ideas, and then language is just about reading more, understanding how, you know, so when you have your favorite author, like, why do you like this author so much? Is it the voice? How does he or she, you know, phrase certain sentences and so on? And it's kind of like learning from there, I guess. Yeah. Questions?
I have a question regarding like when you start writing a book, do you actually plan like how you are going to write a book? Do you set the like purpose, the theme, the motive first,
or you just like randomly, as what you mentioned just now, you just start writing first. But sometimes when you start writing first, you encounter the situation that you have so many ideas coming in, you don't know which direction you should go, and because so many ideas coming in, then you stop. You don't feel confused. You don't know how to go. Then there will be the, I think there will be the for me it's the disaster of that. Yeah. So my question is that, do you structure your ideas before, or you like implement a framework before you're writing a book?
Yes, definitely. I'm a great proponent of planning. I don't think you can just sit down and then write yourself into a hole and then wonder what you're going to do with the character next. No, so we plan everything. I think there was probably an earlier slide that we didn't get to, which was of me and Leslie Ann. That one, okay. So when I wrote the Good and Bad and PSLE, I mean, that was easier because the planning, the writing, everything was done by me, right? So when I was writing with Leslie Ann, so we're talking about 2 writers. So people ask me, I mean, how do we do this? So basically we would sit down and brainstorm. So because we were writing a children's series, so it wasn't just one book. So we had to know like the start point and the ending point, how this character was going to evolve and what would actually happen at the end of the entire series. And then we map out each book, so the story for each book. So yes, we map out right down to every chapter what is going to happen, and then we go in and write. So our first book was, I think, kind of a baptism by fire, because both of us, like, I think we didn't know what we're getting ourselves into. So we would plan, and then we say, okay, we start writing. So we actually sit at 2 different computers. We open one Google Doc, so we're actually writing on the same document. So in the first book, what happened was we'd be writing the same section, and then she wouldn't like something that I write, and then she would delete it, and then I would see it deleting right before my eyes. And I was like, stop that, and I would do the same thing to her. So it was terrible. I mean, we got into so many arguments because we just couldn't agree, right? Because we were both so stubborn, and we both have very strong views, you know, about what word we should use. But in the first book, in the process of the first book, we kind of discovered that we actually have different strengths. And Leslie Ann is much better at writing action sequences. So Danger Dan is an action-packed series, right? So she's so much better at writing the action sequences from the point of view of a kid. Whereas I was better at writing dialogue. So I think when we discovered that after the first book, it was a natural division of flavor. So when we worked out, okay, for this chapter, this is going to happen, so something's going to happen here, and then they need to have a dialogue, they need to say something here. So when we worked out, this is how the chapter is going to go, and then each of us would write the corresponding parts. So I would write all the dialogue segments, she would write all the action sequences, and then we would fill in the transitions together, and that has worked really well for us. Yeah. So, but I think one of the things that I thought I should mention in parent-child collaboration is that your power dynamics are not equal. It starts off unequal, right? So when you have any sort of this sort of project, I think you have to start establishing that both of you would have equal say in the project. You know, otherwise it's very tempting for the parent to just, you know, take over or hijack the project because, you know, you are the parent. So she recognizes that I have a lot more experience in writing, so obviously this comes a lot easier to me. But I also recognize that she is much closer to our target audience age, you know, so she knows better what kids like and what makes kids laugh. Whereas sometimes she tells me my jokes are so old-fashioned. It's like, no kid would like it. So with that, we kind of have that agreement. And so when we write, you cannot be the mother-daughter thing. The emotional part, you know, it cannot come into play. So we try to be very, very objective about it. If there's something we don't agree with, you know, we got to trash it out. So what is it? Why do you think yours is better? You put forth your case. You know, we both put our case. And then, because we both want the book to be as good as it possibly can, right? We have the same objectives anyway. So I remember for one of the books, she was saying that this portion could be jumping back from the point of view of Danger Dan and some other character. And I was like, no, that's very confusing. You know, you should all be from Danger Dan's perspective. And she was like, no, that's very boring. So we couldn't agree. And then she said, okay, why don't I write it out in the way I see it, and then you see if it works. You know, so she did that. She wrote out that whole portion, how she thought it could go. So I read it and I thought, hey, actually it does work. So we went with that. So I think it's coming to a consensus, basically, what do you think works and why, and being very, very objective about it.
Writing for beginners can be very exhausting. I mean, in general, writing can be very exhausting. So how do you replenish yourself? Energize? Or replenish yourself creatively?
Sleep. Sleep and a lot of food.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Do you think good writing is subjective or it is it's recognizable by everyone that it is a good writing? Because I come from a stat board background, so I often have to vet my colleagues' work. But when it comes to when after I vetted my colleagues' work and it goes to my boss often disagree with our opinions, and I often find that my colleague agrees with what we are saying, but unfortunately our boss does not, and it changes the whole writing and become a totally different story at all. So from my perspective, I think it's kind of like a subjective, and I have to suit to what my boss actually wants, rather than the creative or the ingredient that you mentioned is a good writing, which is the creative. Yeah, so maybe you have some view on that.
Okay, well, I mean, in whether it's writing or it's movies and so on, no two people can like the same thing, right? But I think there's general consensus that when you, many people can like something and that's for a reason. So when you write, I believe there are certain principles that are quite standard in good writing. Like, it depends on what you're trying to communicate, and does this communicate in the way that gels with whatever your organization stands for, and it is simple, without being too bombastic, it doesn't make people confused, and so on. So there are quite general principles that kind of stand. Beyond that, style, I guess, it is a little subjective, but if you have a reason for why you think this works. I mean, rather than, well, I think it just works like a gut feel, Then, because the way that we go on with our clients is this works because this, because it communicates and this, and it's not to the. So there is a reason behind why we phrase things a certain way, and that is communicated to the client. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for your insights today, Monica. Let's give her another warm round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. All right, great. So now